Right now, we're going to welcome Joanna Marsh, who covers all things rail for us here at FreightWaves, to talk a little bit about the standards and the standing of the merger between Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern. Joanna, it seems like right now the only people who want this merger are the railways themselves. Everybody else has got some pretty hot opposition.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We have shippers who are concerned about ensuring that market access will stay open. Of course, anytime there's a reduction in the number of Class 1 railroads, there's some sensitivity in terms of service, and especially nowadays with rail service still kind of being an issue. And so you have that, and then you have actually a lot of the railroads having their own objections. You have BNSF and Union Pacific concerned about how their access to gateways, particularly between the U.S. and Mexico border, how that's going to work out. Because as you know, like Kansas City Southern has operations going into Mexico. So you have that. And of course, Norfolk Southern has an agreement with KCS to get to Texas. And so, so the railroads definitely want to see the Surface Transportation Board address some of those issues.
And Joanna, what's the latest with, seems like there's also resistance from Chicago suburbs, and there's been Illinois congressional leaders are backing them. What's been the latest from that situation?
Yeah, so that's interesting because you have the two senators from Illinois, Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth, coming in and wanting to support the Illinois communities. Part of the problem with Chicago is that it's a big interchange point between the eastern and western railroads, and so you have all these railroads coming into the Chicago region, and Chicago is kind of built in already, and so people have had to be really creative about how to maximize network flows there, and especially you have the winter and the winter weather can cause delays in there, so you have those conditions kind of in the background of things. And then you have these suburban communities in Western Chicago saying, hey, they might run more trains and these trains might be long. What are we going to do about block? It's kind of the typical issues that you see in other places. Like, what are we going to do about the block crossings? How are the emergency personnel going to, get through if there's a train? It's kind of in the middle of standing in the way. So you've had, the local leaders come, try to press the Surface Transportation Board about this. And now they've actually had the backing of some congressional senators and congressional House of Representatives people too.
And then also on the opposing side, you've got Canadian National, who is the rival, of course, of CP, saying that, what, we need to protect ourselves in this situation too. And they've got some issues going on with the Springfield, Missouri line. What can you tell us about what's going on there and kind of where CN stands versus CP?
Yeah, so Canadian National, or CN, is asking the Surface Transportation Board to say, hey, why didn't we, so this merger is in place, or this proposed merger is in place. If you approve it, why don't you consider giving us Kansas City Southern's Springfield line, which is between Illinois and Missouri, because CN's argument is that there's a CP line that runs parallel to the KCS line, and it's just, and so it kind of creates, they say, an opportunity for CP or CP-KC, which is what the name of the merged company will be, to get all this traffic. So in order to increase competition, why did you give us that line? And so, and of course, Canadian Pacific is just like, no, that's not going to happen. So we'll see how things go and how the Surface Transportation Board is going to handle things. There's going to be a 3-day hearing at the end of September where they'll hear from CP and they'll hear from probably other railroads and probably the or at least the Illinois communities are hoping that they'll be able to speak there as well. So we'll see, and the shippers, of course.
So when I think about kind of the biggest cases of U.S. kind of the competitiveness and that kind of like competitiveness that is baked into, I guess, U.S. business, I automatically think of railroads. I think of railroads and I think of oils, like those two really huge examples of the necessary for competitiveness and competition in capitalism, right? Can you talk a little bit about how kind of that history of encouraging competitiveness and competition between these massive companies is now playing into this railroad fight? And is there a point now where, like with the rail negotiations, where the federal government steps in and says, okay, this is how we're going to handle this now, instead of just the Surface Transportation Board?
Yeah, I think for now, I think it'll probably still stay within the Surface Transportation Board, just because the merger. So the STB is looking at the merger under older regulatory rules, which I don't want to say are looser, but the focus is different. The focus is more for any new proposed mergers that don't involve Kansas City Southern. It's kind of confusing, but so let's see. So they, let me backtrack a little bit. So in other words, KCS and CP are going to be looked at under older merger rules, which are there's a little less focus on the ensuring enhanced competition. But that said, you have shippers who are concerned that like I said earlier, the number of Class 1 railroads over the past several decades has been steadily reducing, and so there are some concerns that if you merge more companies, or even the number of Class 1s that we have right now, that there are captive shippers out there that don't have that extra option. So there's always that concern about the captive shippers, and especially how that will how the KCS CP merger will affect their access to the market.
And it sounds like this is still early innings for this potential situation here. We'll continue to follow up with you as this develops and moves on further on down the line. Right now, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more Freightwaves Now.